The clock on the wall showed exactly midnight when Michael O'Brien heard the sound. It was a sharp beep that cut through the quiet night inside Fanad Head Lighthouse. He had been a lighthouse keeper for 30 years, and he knew that sound meant trouble. Michael stood up from his chair and walked quickly to the radio equipment. The lighthouse sat on the rocky edge of northwest Ireland, where the wild Atlantic Ocean crashed against the cliffs. On this December night in 2019, a winter storm was battering the coast with fierce winds and massive waves. The beeping continued. It was an SOS signal. Someone was in serious danger out on the dark water. Michael grabbed the radio microphone. His hands were steady despite the rush of worry he felt. He had handled many emergencies before, but each one made his heart beat faster. Lives depended on what happened in the next few minutes and hours. "This is Fanad Head Lighthouse," Michael said into the radio. "We have received your distress signal. Please identify yourself and state your emergency." Static crackled through the speakers. Then a voice came through, strained and urgent. It was a man with an accent that Michael recognized as Korean. "This is MV Atlantic Promise. We are a cargo vessel 15 miles northwest of your position. Our main engine has failed. We are drifting toward the rocks. We need immediate assistance." Michael felt his stomach tighten. 15 miles northwest meant the ship was heading straight for an area the local sailors called the Devil's Teeth. It was a cluster of jagged rocks that had torn apart many ships over the centuries. In a storm like this, with no engine power, the Atlantic Promise would be smashed to pieces if it hit those rocks. "How many people are on board?" Michael asked. 23 crew members, the voice replied. "And we have passengers. The storm is very bad. Waves are hitting the ship hard. We cannot control our direction." Michael immediately contacted the Irish Coast Guard. He explained the situation in clear, calm words. The Coast Guard operator on the other end of the line was a woman named Sarah. She had worked with Michael many times before. "We're scrambling a rescue helicopter now," Sarah said. "But Michael, the weather is extreme. I'm not sure we can fly in these conditions." Michael looked out the lighthouse window. Rain hammered against the glass. The wind screamed around the stone tower. He could barely see 20 feet into the darkness. Sarah was right. Helicopter rescue would be nearly impossible. "What about the Coast Guard cutter?" Michael asked. "The nearest one is 45 minutes away," Sarah said. "I'm sending them now, but I need you to stay in contact with that ship. You're their lifeline right now." Michael understood. He was the connection between the sinking ship and the rescue teams. He had to keep the crew calm and gather information that could save their lives. He returned to the radio. "Atlantic Promise, this is Fanad Head. Help is coming, but it will take time. Tell me about your situation. How fast are you drifting?" The Korean voice came back. "We estimate we will hit the rocks in less than 2 hours, maybe 90 minutes. The current is pulling us fast. We are trying to drop anchor, but the water is too deep here." 2 hours. Michael did quick calculations in his head. The Coast Guard cutter would arrive too late. The helicopter might not be able to fly at all. The ship needed to fix its engine or find another way to stop drifting. "Can you repair the engine?" Michael asked. There was a pause. He heard voices arguing in the background. Then the radio crackled again. "Our chief engineer is checking now. The damage might be too severe. We are also preparing lifeboats in case we must abandon ship." "No," Michael said firmly. "Do not use the lifeboats in this storm. The waves will capsize them in seconds. You are safer on the ship. Focus on the engine repair." He heard the man relay this information to others. More voices in the background speaking rapidly in Korean. Then someone else spoke in English. The accent was different this time. "Lighthouse Keeper, this is Captain Park Min-jun of the Atlantic Promise. We will do everything possible to fix the engine. But I must be honest with you. The situation is very serious." Michael could hear the weight of responsibility in the captain's voice. Captain Park was in charge of 23 lives, and he knew they might all die tonight. "Captain Park, I have been doing this job for 30 years, Michael said. "I have guided many ships through storms. You are not alone. We will work together to bring you home safely." "Thank you," Captain Park said quietly. For the next 20 minutes, Michael coordinated between the ship, the Coast Guard, and the local emergency services. He marked the Atlantic Promise's position on his chart and calculated the drift rate. His predictions were grim. The ship would hit the Devil's Teeth in approximately 90 minutes. The Coast Guard called back. "Michael, the helicopter cannot fly. The winds are too strong. The cutter is coming as fast as possible, but they won't arrive in time." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. He had feared this answer. He opened his eyes and looked at his charts again, searching for any solution he might have missed. The radio suddenly burst with activity. Multiple voices were talking at once on the Atlantic Promise. Someone was shouting. Then Captain Park's voice cut through the chaos. "We have flooding in the engine room. The situation is worse than we thought. Water is coming in through a cracked hull plate." Michael gripped the microphone tighter. A cracked hull meant the ship was taking on water. Even if they fixed the engine, they might sink anyway. "How bad is the flooding?" Michael asked. "Manageable for now," Captain Park said, "but it will slow down the repair work. Everything is more difficult." Then Michael heard something strange in the background. It was another voice speaking English, but with an American accent. The voice was deep and calm, asking questions about the engine. Michael could not hear the words clearly through the storm interference and the chaos on the ship. "Captain Park, who else is speaking English on your ship?" Michael asked. There was a brief pause. "We have some passengers who are traveling with us from Iceland. They are helping where they can." "Passengers on a cargo ship?" Michael was surprised. Cargo vessels rarely carried passengers. "It is a long story," Captain Park said. "They needed transportation and we agreed to help. Now they are trapped in this situation with us." Michael wondered who these passengers were and why they were on a cargo ship in the middle of winter. But there was no time to worry about that now. The important thing was getting everyone off that ship alive. "Captain, focus on the engine," Michael said. "That is your only chance. The rocks are getting closer every minute." "We understand," Captain Park replied. "Our chief engineer and his team are working as fast as they can." Michael updated the Coast Guard again. Sarah's voice was tense when she responded. "We're doing everything we can, Michael. The cutter is running at maximum speed. But the math doesn't work. They won't make it in time." "I know," Michael said. "The ship has to save itself." He returned to the radio and established a regular check-in schedule with Captain Park. Every 5 minutes, they would update each other on the situation. This would help Michael track the ship's position and give the crew a sense of connection to the outside world. As the minutes ticked by, Michael heard more of the American voice in the background. Whoever this passenger was, he seemed to be very involved in the rescue efforts. The voice was asking technical questions and offering to help physically. At one point, Michael heard the American say something about tight spaces and WWE training. The words were broken up by static, but they made Michael curious. What did wrestling training have to do with fixing a ship's engine? The storm continued to rage outside the lighthouse. Michael checked his watch. 60 minutes until the Atlantic Promise hit the rocks, maybe less. He looked at the radio equipment and whispered a prayer. He was not a religious man, but tonight he prayed for the 23 people on that ship. He prayed for Captain Park and his crew. He prayed for the mysterious passengers who had chosen the wrong night to travel by sea. Most of all, he prayed that somehow, against all odds, they would find a way to survive. 2 days earlier, the weather in Reykjavik, Iceland, had been cold but clear. John Cena stood on a stage in a hotel conference room, smiling as a 12-year-old girl hugged him tightly. Her name was Emma, and meeting John was her biggest wish in the world. Emma had been fighting cancer for 3 years. She had watched John's matches and movies during her hospital stays. He made her feel brave when she was scared. Now he was here in person and she could not stop crying happy tears. "You're the strong one," John told her gently. "I just pretend to be strong on TV. You fight real battles every day." This was why John had come to Iceland. The Make-A-Wish Foundation had organized a special event bringing together 20 children from across Europe. John had spent the entire day with them, taking photos, signing autographs, and listening to their stories. This was his 650th wish granted. 650 children who had faced terrible illnesses, and he had taken time to meet each one. Some people thought it was just publicity for his career. Those people had never seen the look in a sick child's eyes when their hero walked into the room. After the event ended, John's assistant Maria approached him. "We have a problem with tomorrow's flight," she said. John was scheduled to fly to Dublin, Ireland the next morning. From there, he would travel to London for a movie premiere. It was a tight schedule. "What kind of problem?" John asked. "The charter plane is small and the weather forecast is bad," Maria explained. "The pilot says he can make the flight, but it will be very rough. Lots of turbulence." John felt his stomach twist. He was not afraid of many things, but small planes and bad weather made him nervous. He had been in a frightening flight once before, years ago. when a small plane hit severe turbulence. Everyone had been scared. The pilot had barely managed to land safely. "Are there any other options?" John asked. Maria checked her tablet. "Commercial flights are booked solid. It's the holiday season. But there is one alternative." She showed him an email. "A cargo ship called the Atlantic Promise is leaving tomorrow for Dublin. The captain has agreed to take passengers if needed. It will take 2 days instead of 2 hours, but it might be safer than flying in a storm." John thought about this. He would miss the premiere in London, but his safety was more important. His mother had always told him to trust his instincts. Right now his instincts said not to get on that small plane. "Book passage on the ship," John said. "I'll explain to the studio about missing the premiere." The next morning, John and Maria arrived at the Reykjavik docks. The MV Atlantic Promise was a medium-sized cargo vessel, painted white and blue. It looked sturdy and well-maintained. Cargo containers were stacked on its deck, and crew members were securing them with chains and ropes. A man in a captain's uniform walked down the gangway to meet them. He was in his 50s with gray hair and a weathered face that showed years of ocean experience. "Mr. Cena, I am Captain Park Min-jun," he said, shaking John's hand. "Welcome aboard my ship. I must tell you, this is not a luxury cruise. We are a working vessel. The accommodations are basic." "That's fine, Captain," John said. "I appreciate you making room for us." Captain Park smiled. "It is an honor. My son is a big fan of yours. He will not believe me when I tell him you were on my ship." They walked up the gangway and onto the deck. The ship smelled like salt, diesel fuel, and metal. Crew members were working everywhere, preparing for departure. Most of them were Korean, and they spoke to each other in their own language as they worked. A young man approached, looking excited. He was in his 20s, wearing grease-stained overalls. "Mr. Cena, I am Lee Jae-sung. I am the assistant engineer. This is amazing. I have watched all of your matches." John laughed and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jae-sung. So you're the one who keeps this ship running?" "I try," Jae-sung said proudly. "The engine room is my responsibility. Would you like to see it later?" "I would," John said. He was genuinely interested. He liked learning about how things worked. Captain Park showed John and Maria to their cabins. They were small rooms with narrow beds, a desk, and a tiny bathroom. Maria looked disappointed, but John thought they were comfortable enough. "We will depart in 1 hour," Captain Park said. "You are welcome on the bridge any time. Meals are served in the crew mess hall at 6, 12, and 6. If you need anything, just ask." After Captain Park left, Maria said, "Are you sure about this? 2 days on a cargo ship seems boring." John shrugged. "It will be an adventure. When was the last time you did something different?" As the Atlantic Promise left the harbor, John stood on the deck and watched Iceland disappear behind them. The sky was gray and the wind was cold, but the sea was relatively calm. Other ships moved in and out of the harbor and seabirds circled overhead. That first day at sea was peaceful. John explored the ship, chatted with crew members, and learned about their work. Many of them were surprised that a celebrity was interested in their daily routines. They showed him how they navigated, how they maintained the cargo, and how they prepared meals for 23 people every day. Jae-sung gave him a tour of the engine room. It was hot and loud down there, filled with massive machinery that turned the ship's propellers. "This engine is 30 years old," Jae-sung explained, shouting over the noise. "But we maintain it very well. It is very reliable." John noticed an older man working on one of the machines. He was thin and serious-looking, checking gauges and making notes on a clipboard. "That is Chief Engineer Choi Hyun," Jae-sung said. "He has worked on ships for 40 years. He knows everything about engines." As if hearing his name, Choi Hyun looked up. He saw John and nodded politely but did not smile. He seemed focused entirely on his work. "He does not talk much," Jae-sung whispered, "but he is the best engineer I have ever worked with." That evening, John ate dinner with the crew in the mess hall. The food was simple but good. Rice, fish, vegetables, and soup. The crew members were friendly once they got over their initial shyness. They asked John about wrestling, movies, and America. He answered their questions and asked about their lives too. One crew member, a young sailor named Kim Min-ho, asked, "Why did you choose a cargo ship instead of flying? You could have taken a private jet." "Sometimes the slow way is better," John said. "And I don't like small planes in bad weather." Several crew members nodded. They understood respecting the weather. The next morning, John woke early. He went up to the deck and found the weather had changed. The sky was darker now and the waves were bigger. The ship was rocking more than yesterday. Captain Park was on the bridge studying weather reports on a computer screen. He looked concerned. "Is there a problem, Captain?" John asked. Captain Park glanced at him. "A storm is developing faster than predicted. It is moving south from the Arctic. We will encounter it tonight. Is that dangerous?" "Ships are built to handle storms," Captain Park said. "But this one is quite large. It will be uncomfortable for the passengers. You and your assistant might want to stay in your cabins once it begins." John looked out at the gray ocean. "I've been through rough times before, Captain. We'll be fine." But as the day progressed, the weather grew worse. The wind increased and the waves became enormous. The ship began to pitch and roll, climbing up one wave and sliding down the next. Maria became seasick and stayed in her cabin. By evening, the storm was at full strength. Rain lashed the ship and the wind screamed through the rigging. John could feel the vessel struggling against the massive waves. He was in his cabin, holding onto his bed as the ship tilted at scary angles. Then, at 11:47 p.m., he heard a loud grinding sound from deep below. It was followed by shouting in Korean. The ship's alarm began to ring. John rushed out of his cabin and headed toward the bridge. He met Jae-sung in the corridor. The young engineer's face was pale. "What happened?" John asked. "The main engine," Jae-sung said. "Something is very wrong. I have to get to the engine room." John followed him down the metal stairs. They could feel the ship behaving differently now. Without engine power, the vessel was at the mercy of the waves. It was being pushed and turned by forces it could no longer resist. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Choi Hyun was standing in front of the silent engine. His face showed the first emotion John had seen from him: fear. "The main drive shaft has fractured," Choi Hyun said in English. "And there is damage to the fuel system. The engine is dead," Captain Park's voice came over the intercom. "All crew to emergency stations. We have lost main engine power. We are drifting." John looked at the massive silent engine. This machine was supposed to be reliable. It was supposed to get them safely to Ireland. Now it was just tons of useless metal. Jae-sung was already grabbing tools. "We can fix this," he said, but he did not sound confident. Choi Hyun shook his head. "In calm water, maybe. But in this storm, while we are drifting toward rocks, I do not know if we have time." "Rocks?" John asked. "What rocks?" No one answered him. They were too busy trying to save the ship. John climbed back to the bridge. Captain Park was on the radio speaking urgently to someone. When he finished, he looked at John with a grim expression. "We are in serious danger," the captain said. "There are rocks 15 miles ahead of us. The storm is pushing us straight toward them. We have maybe 90 minutes before impact. What can I do to help?" John asked. Captain Park looked surprised. "You are a passenger?" On the bridge of the Atlantic Promise, Captain Park Min-jun stared at the radar screen. The jagged rocks called the Devil's Teeth showed up as bright dots on the display. His ship was moving toward them like a leaf caught in a river current. The storm was pushing them faster than he had calculated. 75 minutes, he said quietly. Maybe less. His first officer, a woman named Jung Soo-min, stood beside him. Her hands gripped the railing so hard her knuckles were white. "Should we prepare the lifeboats, Captain?" Park shook his head. "In these waves? The boats would flip in seconds. Anyone who goes into that water will die in minutes. The water temperature is only 4 degrees. Even with survival suits, they would not last long. Then what do? "We pray that Choi can restart the engine," Park said. "And we hope the Coast Guard arrives in time." But he knew the Coast Guard would not arrive in time. The lighthouse keeper had told him the rescue cutter was still 30 minutes away when they needed it now. The helicopter could not fly. They were alone on this dark, violent ocean. Down in the crew quarters, men and women were putting on life jackets and gathering emergency supplies. Some were praying. Others were writing messages to their families on pieces of paper, sealing them in plastic bags. If they died tonight, maybe the messages would wash ashore someday. Kim Min-ho, the young sailor who had talked to John at dinner, was crying silently. This was his first contract on a cargo ship. He was only 20 years old. He had promised his mother he would come home safely. In the engine room, the situation was desperate. Water was ankle-deep on the floor and rising. Chief Engineer Choi Hyun had discovered the damage was worse than his initial assessment. Not only was the drive shaft fractured, but seawater was pouring in through a cracked hull plate near the engine mounts. "We have two problems now," Choi explained to Jae-sung and John. "Fix the engine and stop the flooding. We cannot do both at the same time with our crew." "What if we focus on the engine first?" Jae-sung suggested. "If we can get power back, we can pump out the water and move away from the rocks." Choi nodded. "That is correct. But the repair requires accessing the fuel system bypass valves. They are in the lower engine compartment." He pointed to the small access panel. "That space is now flooded with seawater. It is cold, dark, and dangerous. And someone must go down there." John stepped forward. "I'll go." Choi looked at him doubtfully. "This is not a movie stunt, Mr. Cena. One mistake down there could cause an explosion. The compartment is full of fuel vapors mixed with seawater. You could be electrocuted. You could drown. You could be crushed if the ship rolls at the wrong moment." "I understand the risks," John said. "But you need someone small enough to fit through that panel, and strong enough to turn those valves." "That's me. Show me what to do." Jae-sung pulled up a technical diagram on a waterproof tablet. "The bypass valves are here, here, and here," he said, pointing to 3 locations. "You must open all 3 valves in the correct sequence. First the primary, then the secondary, then the emergency. If you do it wrong, fuel will flood the compartment." "What's the correct sequence?" John asked, studying the diagram carefully. "Primary is the red valve on the left side. Turn it 3 full rotations clockwise. Secondary is the blue valve in the center, 2 rotations clockwise. Emergency is the green valve on the right. 1 full rotation clockwise." John repeated the sequence back. "Red 3 times. Blue 2 times. Green 1 time. All clockwise." "Correct," Jae-sung said. "I will stay on the radio and guide you. You will have a waterproof headset and a helmet light. But Mr. Cena, you must be very careful. The water is freezing. You can only stay down there for 15 or 20 minutes before hypothermia sets in." "Then we better work fast," John said. They gave him a survival suit that would protect him somewhat from the cold water. They strapped a tool belt around his waist with wrenches and other equipment. They fitted him with a helmet that had a bright LED light attached to it. The waterproof radio headset went into his ear. Before John climbed down through the access panel, Choi Hyun put a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for doing this," the old engineer said. "You are very brave." "Let's see if I'm brave or stupid," John replied with a slight smile. He lowered himself through the narrow opening. It was a tight squeeze even for him. He had to turn sideways to fit his shoulders through. Below him, he could hear water sloshing around in the darkness. His feet touched the water. It was shockingly cold even through the survival suit. He gasped as he lowered himself further into the flooded compartment. The water rose to his knees, then his waist, then his chest. "I'm in," he said into the radio. "Water is chest deep. I can see the valves with my helmet light." "Good." Jae-sung's voice came through the headset. "Move carefully. The floor is covered with debris from the engine damage. Do not trip." John waded forward slowly. The ship was still rocking violently, and the water surged back and forth with each roll. Twice he almost lost his balance. His helmet light revealed a nightmare landscape of broken pipes, loose cables, and floating debris. He reached the first valve. It was the red primary valve, exactly where the diagram had shown. He pulled a wrench from his tool belt and fitted it onto the valve handle. "I'm at the primary valve," he reported. 3 full rotations clockwise," Jae-sung reminded him. "The valve will be stiff. You will need to use your strength." John braced himself and pulled on the wrench. The valve did not move. He pulled harder, putting his whole body into it. The ship tilted suddenly and water surged up to his neck. He held his breath and kept pulling. The valve moved. 1 rotation. 2 rotations. 3 rotations, primary valve open, he gasped. "Excellent," Jae-sung said. "Now the secondary valve." The blue one in the center. John waded toward it. His arms were already starting to feel numb from the cold. The survival suit helped, but nothing could completely protect against water this freezing. He found the blue valve and attached his wrench. This one was even stiffer than the first. He pulled with all his strength. His WWE training had built tremendous upper body power, and he needed every bit of it now. The valve turned. 1 rotation. 2 rotations. Secondary valve open, he said. "Last one," Jae-sung encouraged. The green emergency valve. 1 rotation only. John was shivering now. The cold was seeping into his body despite the suit. His hands were clumsy as he reached for the 3rd valve. That was when the ship hit a massive wave. The Atlantic Promise rolled hard to starboard. John lost his footing and fell into the dark water. His head went under. Water flooded into his mouth and nose. He could not see anything. Which way was up? His hand hit something hard, a pipe. He grabbed it and pulled himself upright. His helmet light broke the surface and he gasped for air. "Mr. Cena, are you okay?" Jae-sung's voice was panicked in his headset. "I'm okay," John coughed. "Just fell." "Where's the green valve?" "To your right." 3 feet away, John found it and fitted his wrench. His hands were shaking badly now. 1 rotation clockwise. That was all he needed. He turned the valve. It moved smoothly, almost too easily. "Emergency valve open," he said. "All 3 valves are open." Jae-sung shouted. "Now you must get out of there. We need to test the engine." John turned to wade back to the access panel, but his body was not responding correctly. His legs felt heavy and slow. The cold had sapped his strength faster than he expected. He forced himself to move. 1 step, another step. The access panel seemed so far away. Above him, he heard a metallic grinding sound. Then a loud clang. "What was that?" he asked. Silence on the radio. "Jae-sung." "Choi, what was that sound?" More silence. Then Jae-sung's voice came back, filled with horror. "The access panel. It jammed shut. The ship's movement twisted the frame. We cannot open it." John looked up at the ceiling of the compartment. The panel was indeed closed. He was trapped down here. "Can you force it open?" John asked, trying to keep his voice calm. "We are trying." Choi's voice came through. "But it may take time. The frame is bent badly." John looked around the flooded compartment. The water seemed to be rising. His helmet light reflected off the dark surface. He was standing in chest-deep freezing water, trapped in a metal box at the bottom of a sinking ship. "How much time?" he asked. No one answered that question. On the bridge, Captain Park received the news about John being trapped. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Another crisis on top of the engine failure, the flooding, and the rocks that were now only 50 minutes away. "Keep working on that panel," he ordered over the radio. "And someone tell me if we can restart the engine even with the American trapped down there." At Fanad Head Lighthouse, Michael O'Brien heard the conversation over the open radio channel. The mysterious American passenger was trapped in a flooded compartment. Michael's experienced mind understood what that meant. The man was probably going to die down there, either from hypothermia, drowning, or being crushed when the ship hit the rocks. "Coast Guard, this is Fanad Head," Michael said into his radio. "How far out is that cutter?" 25 minutes, Sarah replied. "But Michael, even when they arrive, what can they do? The ship is about to hit the rocks." Michael had no answer. He looked out at the storm and felt helpless. All his years of experience, all his knowledge, and he could not think of any way to save that crew. In the flooded engine compartment, John was fighting to stay conscious. The cold was overwhelming now. His body was shutting down. He knew the signs of hypothermia from safety training he had done for movie stunts. Shivering, confusion, slurred speech, drowsiness. He was experiencing all of them. "Stay awake, Mr. Cena," Jae-sung's voice said in his ear. "We are almost through the panel. Just stay awake." "Trying," John mumbled. His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely speak. He forced himself to think about warm things. Sunny days, hot showers, coffee, anything to keep his mind working. Above him, 6 crew members were attacking the jammed panel with cutting torches, pry bars, and hammers. They were working as fast as they could, but the twisted metal was incredibly stubborn. And while they worked to free John, the Atlantic Promise drifted closer and closer to the Devil's Teeth. Captain Park looked at the radar one more time. 40 minutes, he whispered. He picked up the ship's intercom microphone. His hand trembled slightly as he pressed the button. He had never given this kind of announcement before. He had hoped he would never have to. "Attention all crew," he said, his voice echoing through every corridor and compartment of the ship. "We are facing a very serious situation. In 40 minutes, we may impact the rocks ahead of us. We have lost engine power, and rescue will not arrive in time." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I want you to know that it has been an honor to serve as your captain. You are the finest crew I have ever worked with. If this is our final voyage together, know that you have done everything possible. The failure is not yours. It is simply bad fortune." Another pause. His voice became softer. "Take a moment now. Pray if you believe in prayer. Think of your families. Make peace with whatever you need to make peace with, but do not give up hope. Our engineers are still fighting to restart the engine. Miracles can happen. He released the microphone button and bowed his head. Throughout the ship, crew members stopped what they were doing. Some prayed to Buddha. Others prayed to Jesus. Some prayed to gods whose names had been spoken in Korea for thousands of years. A few did not pray at all but thought of their children, their parents, their loved ones far away. In the flooded compartment, John heard the captain's announcement. Despite the cold and the fear, he felt a strange sense of calm. If he was going to die tonight, at least it would be while trying to help others. That seemed like a good way to go. But he was not ready to die yet. Jae-sung, he said into the radio. His voice was weak but determined. Is there anything else I can do down here? Any other valves or switches that might help? There was a pause. Then Choi Hyun's voice came through. There is one thing, the old engineer said slowly, but it is very dangerous. John Cena stood in the freezing water and waited for Choi Hyun to explain. His entire body was shaking uncontrollably now. The cold had penetrated deep into his muscles and bones. He knew he only had a few more minutes before his body would simply stop working. Tell me what to do, John said. His words came out slurred and difficult. Choi's voice was hesitant. There is a manual fuel primer pump in that compartment. It is on the far wall near the waterline. The pump is used to push fuel through the system when the engine has been idle for a long time. If you can operate it, you might be able to prime the fuel lines. Then we can try to start the engine from up here. Where is this pump? John asked. Look for a red handle on the wall. It will be partially underwater now. You pull the handle up and down repeatedly. It takes great strength. You must pump it 100 times to fully prime the system. John turned slowly in the water, sweeping his helmet light across the walls. Everything was shadows and reflecting water. Then he saw it. A red handle, half submerged, about 10 feet away from him. He started wading toward it. Each step was harder than the last. His legs felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. The water resisted every movement. I see it, he said. Above him, in the engine room, the crew members were still working frantically on the jammed access panel. They had managed to cut through one section of the twisted frame, but there was more to do. Jae-sung kept looking at his watch. They were running out of time in every possible way. John reached the pump handle. He grabbed it with both hands. It was freezing metal, even colder than the water. He tried to pull it upward. It would not move. He pulled harder. His muscles screamed in protest. The cold had made him weak, and this pump clearly had not been used in months or years. It was stuck. It won't move, John said. You must try harder, Choi said. The pump is stiff, but it will work. Use all your strength. John planted his feet as firmly as he could on the debris-covered floor. He gripped the handle and pulled with everything he had left. His arms trembled. His shoulders burned. Every fiber of his being wanted to give up and let the cold take him. The handle moved. Just a little, but it moved. He pulled again. It moved more. He was breaking through the rust and corrosion that had locked it in place. Then it suddenly came free. John stumbled backward and almost fell again. He caught himself and returned to the pump. It's moving now, he reported. 100 pumps, Choi reminded him. Count them carefully. Every pump matters. John began to work the handle. Pull up, push down, 1 pull up, push down, 2 pull up, push down, 3. His body protested every movement. The cold was making his muscles cramp. His hands were so numb he could barely feel the handle anymore. But he kept counting. 10 pumps. 20 pumps. 30 pumps. How are you doing, Mr. Cena? Jae-sung's voice was worried. Still pumping, John managed to say. 45. 46. 47. On the bridge, Captain Park watched the radar. The Devil's Teeth were now terrifyingly close. 25 minutes. Maybe 20. The current was pulling them faster as they approached the rocks. He had sent Young-soo Min to check on the crew's morale. She came back with tears in her eyes. They are being brave, she said. But everyone knows what is coming. Park nodded. And the rescue cutter? Still 15 minutes away. Too late. It would all be too late. At Faneuil Head Lighthouse, Michael O'Brien was updating the Coast Guard on the situation. His voice remained calm and professional, but inside he felt sick. He had guided hundreds of ships safely through storms over his 30 years as a keeper. Tonight he was going to fail. The ship is now 7 miles from the rocks, Michael reported. Current speed and direction unchanged. Estimated impact in 23 minutes. Sarah's voice was heavy with grief. Understood, Faneuil Head. The cutter is doing everything possible. Michael looked at the radio and made a decision. Coast Guard, I want to stay on an open channel with the Atlantic Promise. If these are their final minutes, they should not be alone. Agreed, Sarah said quietly. We'll stay with them too. In the flooded compartment, John had reached 70 pumps. His arms were barely responding to his commands now. Each pump took longer than the last. The handle seemed to get heavier and heavier. 75, 76, 77. You are doing great, Mr. Cena. Jae-sung encouraged. Keep going. We are almost ready up here. John could not respond. He needed all his concentration for the pumping. His vision was getting blurry. Was that from the cold or from exhaustion? He did not know. 80, 81, 82. He thought about all the children he had met through Make-A-Wish. Emma in Iceland, just 2 days ago. And the 649 others before her. They had all faced death with courage. If they could be brave, so could he. 90, 91, 92. His hand slipped off the handle. He had lost all feeling in his fingers. He looked at his hands in the light from his helmet. They looked like they belonged to someone else. Pale, wrinkled, useless. He forced them back onto the handle. 3 fingers on his right hand were not working at all. He gripped with his palms and wrists instead. 93, 94, 95. Almost there, Choi's voice said. 5 more pumps. You can do this. John pulled up and pushed down. 96, pull up, push down. 97, pull up, push down. 98. He was crying now, though he was not sure why. Maybe from the pain, maybe from the cold, maybe from the thought that he might never see daylight again. Pull up, push down. 99, one more. Just one more. He gathered every tiny bit of strength left in his body. He thought of his mother. He thought of his friends. He thought of Emma's smile when she had hugged him in Iceland. Pull up, push down. 100. Done, he whispered into the radio. Then he collapsed into the water. His helmet light went under the surface. Everything went dark and quiet. The freezing water surrounded him completely. It would be so easy to just stay down here, to let go, to rest. But something made him push himself back up. His head broke the surface. He gasped for air. John! Jae-sung was shouting. Stay awake. We are trying to start the engine now. John could not respond. He was done. He had nothing left to give. He leaned against the wall and focused on keeping his head above water. In the engine room, Choi Hyun stood at the engine control panel. His hands moved across switches and buttons with practiced precision. Jae-sung stood beside him, holding his breath. Fuel pressure is building, Choi said. The primer pump worked. We have fuel in the lines, and can we start it? Jae-sung asked. We can try. Choi's finger hovered over the starter button, but there is still damage to the drive shaft. The engine might tear itself apart when we try to engage it, or it might not start at all. We have to try, Jae-sung said. Choi nodded. He pressed the starter button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. The engine turned over once, making a grinding sound. Then it stopped. No, Jae-sung said. Please, no. Choi pressed the button a 3rd time. The engine turned over twice. It coughed and sputtered. Black smoke poured from the exhaust pipes. Then it died again. On the bridge, Captain Park heard the attempts. He saw the engine status lights flicker and go dark. His shoulders slumped. It is not going to start, he said to no one in particular. He looked at the radar one more time. 15 minutes to impact. He picked up the intercom. All crew, prepare for collision. Get to the upper decks. Away from the hull. This is not a drill. Throughout the ship, crew members began moving to the designated emergency areas. They helped each other up the stairs and ladders. Some were crying. Others were silent, lost in their own thoughts. Kim Min-ho, the young sailor, held tightly to a photo of his mother. He had kept it in his pocket since leaving home. He kissed it and whispered, I am sorry, Mother. In the engine room, the crew members working on the jammed panel finally broke through the last section of twisted metal. They pulled the panel open. We got it, one of them shouted. The panel is open. Jae-sung rushed to the opening and looked down. He could see John's helmet light below, barely moving. Mr. Cena! Can you hear me? The panel is open. You can come up now. There was no response. He is not moving, Jae-sung said, panic in his voice. I think he has passed out. 2 crew members immediately began lowering a rope with a harness attached. We will pull him up, one said, but it was too late for that to save the ship. Even if they got John out right now, the engine was dead. They were still drifting toward the rocks. Choi Hyun stared at the engine control panel. His mind was racing through everything he knew about marine engines. There had to be something. Some solution they had not tried. Then he saw it. A small detail on the electrical schematic displayed on the monitor. A backup ignition system that ran on a separate circuit. It was designed for emergencies exactly like this. "Wait," he said. "There is one more thing we can try." Jae-sung looked at him. "What?" "The backup ignition. It bypasses the main electrical system, but I need to physically connect two wires in the junction box." He pointed to a metal box on the wall. "It is not designed for our engine configuration. We would have to jury-rig it. How long will it take?" 2 minutes. "Maybe 3. Jae-sung looked at his watch. "We do not have 2 minutes." "Then we will have to work very fast," Choi said. He grabbed tools and rushed to the junction box. He ripped off the cover and stared at the tangle of wires inside. Red, blue, green, yellow, black. Dozens of them. He needed to connect the red wire from circuit A7 to the blue wire from circuit B3, but he had to be absolutely certain. One mistake and he could short out the entire electrical system. Then they would have no chance at all. His hands shook as he traced the wires. There. Red from A7. And there. Blue from B3. He stripped the insulation from both wires with a knife. His 60-year-old eyes strained to see in the dim light. His hands, weathered from 40 years of shipwork, moved with desperate precision. He twisted the wires together. Then he wrapped them with electrical tape to insulate the connection. "Done," he said. He ran back to the control panel. Jae-sung was standing there, pale as a ghost. "The rocks," Jae-sung said. "We can see them through the portholes." Choi did not look. He focused on the control panel. He flipped the switch that activated the backup ignition system. A yellow warning light came on. That was good. It meant the circuit was active. He took a deep breath. Then he pressed the starter button one more time. The engine turned over. Once, twice, 3 times. It coughed, sputtered. Black smoke poured from the exhausts again, then like a miracle it caught. The engine roared to life. The entire ship shook as the massive engine engaged. The sound was beautiful. It was the sound of hope. "We have power," Jae-sung screamed. "We have power." On the bridge, Captain Park saw the engine status lights turn green. For a moment he could not believe it. Then training took over. "Full reverse," he shouted. "All stop. Full reverse now." Young Sumin spun the controls. The ship's propeller reversed direction, fighting against the current that was pulling them toward the rocks. The Atlantic Promise shuddered and slowed. But were they close enough to stop in time? Captain Park stared out the forward windows. Through the rain and darkness he could see white foam. That was the waves breaking on the rocks. They were so close. "Come on," he whispered. "Come on." The ship slowed more. The engine screamed with effort. Metal groaned and protested. But slowly, painfully, the Atlantic Promise came to a halt. They were 50 meters from the rocks. Maybe less. Close enough to see the jagged black stone reaching up from the white foam like teeth. The devil's teeth. But they had stopped. They were not moving forward anymore. The engine was holding them in place against the current. Captain Park grabbed the radio. "Coast Guard, this is Atlantic Promise. We have restarted our engine. We are holding position. We stopped just short of the rocks." Sarah's voice came back immediately, filled with emotion. "Atlantic Promise, this is Coast Guard. We copy that you have engine power. The cutter will be with you in 5 minutes. Well done, Captain. Well done." At Fanad Head Lighthouse, Michael O'Brien closed his eyes and let out a long breath. He had been holding that breath without realizing it. The ship had survived. Against all odds, they had survived. In the engine room, crew members were cheering and hugging each other. Choi Hyun leaned against the wall, exhausted. Jae-sung was crying with relief. Then Jae-sung remembered. "John, Mr. Cena is still in the compartment." They rushed to the open access panel. The crew members had lowered the rope harness, but John had not put it on. He was just floating in the water, his helmet light pointing downward. "Pull him up," Choi ordered. "Now." 3 men grabbed the rope and pulled. John's body rose slowly from the water. When they got him through the panel and onto the engine room floor, he was not moving. His lips were blue. His skin was white. His eyes were closed. "Is he breathing?" Jae-sung asked. The ship's medic, who had rushed down when he heard about the rescue, knelt beside John. He checked for a pulse. Put his ear to John's chest. He is breathing, the medic said, but barely. Severe hypothermia. We need to get him warm immediately. They stripped off John's wet survival suit and wrapped him in thermal blankets. They carried him to the sick bay and put him under heat lamps. The medic started an IV to get warm fluids into his body. John's eyes flickered open briefly. He tried to speak, but no words came out. Rest, the medic said gently. You are safe now. The ship is safe. Everyone is safe because of you. John's eyes closed again, but this time it was not the darkness of hypothermia or unconsciousness. It was just sleep. The deep, exhausted sleep of someone who had given everything they had to save others. And as he slept, the Coast Guard cutter arrived and began escorting the damaged Atlantic Promise toward the safety of Dublin Harbor. Dawn broke over the Irish Sea with gray light filtering through the storm clouds. The worst of the weather had passed, leaving behind choppy waves and a cold wind. The MV Atlantic Promise moved slowly through the water, escorted by the Irish Coast Guard cutter Roy Cena. In the ship's sick bay, John Cena opened his eyes. His body ached everywhere. His hands were wrapped in bandages. His chest hurt when he breathed. But he was alive. The ship's medic, a middle-aged man named Park Sung-ho, saw him wake up and smiled. Welcome back, Mr. Cena. You gave us quite a scare. What happened? John's voice was rough and scratchy. You had severe hypothermia. Your core body temperature had dropped to dangerous levels. We have been warming you slowly for the past 4 hours. The medic checked John's vital signs on a monitor. Your temperature is almost normal now. You are going to be okay. John tried to sit up, but his body would not cooperate. Everything felt weak and heavy. Where are we? He asked. About 30 miles from Dublin Harbor. The engine is running, but Captain Park is keeping our speed slow. We have some damage to the hull and other systems. The Coast Guard is escorting us to make sure we arrive safely. Memory came flooding back to John. The flooded compartment, the manual pump, the freezing water, the jammed door. Did the engine start? He asked. The medic's smile grew wider. It started. You saved this ship, Mr. Cena. You saved all 23 of us. John shook his head slightly. I just pumped a handle. The engineers did the real work. The door to the sick bay opened. Captain Park Min-jun entered, followed by Chief Engineer Choi Hyan and Lee Jae-sung. All 3 men looked exhausted but relieved. Mr. Cena, Captain Park said, his voice formal and respectful. I am glad to see you awake. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, John said honestly. But I'll survive. Captain Park nodded. Yes, you will survive. And so will all of us, thanks to your actions last night. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have been a ship captain for 27 years. I have seen brave men do brave things, but I have never seen anything like what you did. You risked your life for people you had just met. For crew members whose names you barely knew, that is true heroism. Anyone would have done the same, John said. Choi Hyun stepped forward. No, Mr. Cena. Not everyone would have gone into that compartment. Most people would have been too afraid. You were afraid too, I could see it. But you went anyway. That is what makes you a hero. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to act despite it. Jae-sung was holding something in his hands. He presented it to John. It was John's belt buckle, the one he had used to secure the electrical connection in the flooded compartment. You saved us with this, Jae-sung said, his voice emotional. When I inspected the engine this morning, I found this holding the power connection together. Without it, the backup ignition system would not have worked. You gave us the final piece we needed. John looked at the belt buckle. It was scratched and tarnished from the salt water, but it had done its job. Keep it, he said to Jae-sung. You guided me through everything down there. We did it together. Jae-sung's eyes filled with tears. He clutched the belt buckle to his chest and bowed deeply. Thank you, Mr. Cena. Thank you for saving my life. The other crew members had gathered outside the sick bay. When Captain Park opened the door wider, they all bowed in unison. Young Kim Min-ho was crying openly. Others had their hands pressed together in prayer position. John felt uncomfortable with all this attention. He had just done what needed to be done, but he could see in their faces that it meant everything to them. He had given them a second chance at life. How is the ship? John asked Captain Park, changing the subject. The engine is running but unstable, the captain explained. The drive shaft is still fractured. We are using the backup systems that you helped activate. The hull has a crack that we have temporarily sealed. We are taking on water slowly, but the pumps can handle it. We will make it to Dublin, but this ship will need extensive repairs. And the crew? Is everyone okay? Everyone is healthy. Some injuries. Bruises, cuts, one sprained ankle, but no one died. Not a single person. That is the miracle of last night. John closed his eyes for a moment. They had been so close to disaster. 50 meters from the rocks. Minutes from impact. If any single thing had gone differently, they would all be dead now. There is something you should know, Captain Park continued. The story has already reached the media. A passenger on the Coast Guard cutter recognized you when we made contact. He took photos and posted them on social media. By now, the whole world knows that John Cena was on our ship and helped save it. John groaned. I was hoping to keep this quiet. I am afraid that is impossible now, Park said. There are already news crews waiting at the Dublin docks. The Irish Coast Guard has issued a statement praising your actions. The story is everywhere. In his pocket, John's phone buzzed repeatedly. Maria, his assistant, had been sending worried messages since the night before. His agent was calling. His publicist was calling. Everyone wanted to know if the story was true. I will need to make a statement, John said, resigned to the reality. But I want to make sure everyone understands that I was just one part of a team. You, Captain Park, Choi Jae-sung, the entire crew, the lighthouse keeper who coordinated the rescue. The Coast Guard, everyone played a role. We will tell the complete story, Captain Park assured him. But you should know, Mr. Cena, that without you in that compartment, we would not have had time to restart the engine. You gave us those extra minutes we needed. That is simply the truth. At Fanad Head Lighthouse, Michael O'Brien was drinking his morning coffee and reading the news on his tablet. The story was indeed everywhere. Hollywood star saves ship in daring rescue. John Cena's real-life heroism at sea. Wrestling champion becomes maritime hero. Michael smiled. He had listened to the entire emergency over the radio. He knew the full story, not just the dramatic headlines. Yes, the American celebrity had done something brave, but so had Captain Park, who made difficult decisions under pressure. So had Choi Hyun, who figured out the backup ignition system. So had young Lee Jae-sung, who guided the repairs with expert knowledge. And yes, Michael thought with some pride, so had one old lighthouse keeper who stayed on the radio all night and refused to let that crew face their crisis alone. His phone rang. It was a reporter from the Irish Times. Mr. O'Brien, we understand you were the lighthouse keeper who coordinated the rescue of the Atlantic Promise last night. Can you comment on John Cena's role in the rescue? Michael thought carefully before answering. John Cena did something very brave. But he was not alone. Maritime rescue is always a team effort. The ship's crew, the Coast Guard, the emergency services, and yes, the lighthouse keepers who watch over these waters. We all played our parts. But would you say he was the hero of the story? I would say there were 23 heroes on that ship last night, Michael replied. And every single one of them deserved to survive. They all worked together to make that happen. Aboard the Atlantic Promise, the crew was preparing for their arrival in Dublin. They cleaned up the debris from the engine room. They organized their personal belongings. They helped each other write official reports about the incident. But mostly, they talked about how close they had come to dying and how grateful they were to be alive. Kim Min-ho approached John, who was now able to walk around despite his bandaged hands and lingering weakness. The young sailor held out a small carved figure of a turtle. This is a symbol of long life and protection in Korea, Kim explained. My grandmother gave it to me before I went to sea. I want you to have it. Because you gave me my long life. John accepted the gift, touched by the gesture. Thank you, Kim. But your long life is ahead of you. You're young. You have so much to experience. That is true because of you, Kim said simply. Throughout the day, other crew members approached John with similar gifts and expressions of gratitude. A prayer bracelet, a photograph, a handwritten letter. Each one represented a life that had been saved. John realized that this would change his relationship with heroism forever. In movies and wrestling, heroism was staged and planned. It was safe. Everyone went home at the end of the day, but last night had been real. The fear had been real. The cold had been real. The possibility of death had been absolutely real, and the gratitude he was receiving now was real too. These were not fans thanking him for entertainment. These were human beings thanking him for their lives. As Dublin Harbor came into view, Captain Park brought John up to the bridge. The city's skyline was visible in the distance. Dozens of boats had come out to escort them in, their horns blowing in celebration. "Look at that," Park said, pointing to the docks. "The whole city has come to welcome us home." John could see crowds of people lining the waterfront. News helicopters circled overhead. Camera crews were set up on every available space. "This is going to be quite a scene," John said. "Yes," Park agreed, "but you do not have to face it alone. The crew and I will stand with you. We will tell the story together." John looked at the captain and nodded. "Thank you, Captain Park, for everything." "No, Mr. Cena, thank you. You came aboard my ship as a passenger seeking safe passage. You became part of my crew in the moment we needed you most. That is something I will never forget." The Atlantic Promise moved slowly into Dublin Harbor. The Coast Guard cutter Roycene led the way, its lights flashing. Behind them, the fishing boats and pleasure craft followed in a procession. On the dock, officials from the Irish Coast Guard waited to greet them. Medical teams stood ready to evaluate the crew. And yes, dozens of journalists with cameras and microphones were positioned everywhere. As the ship pulled alongside the dock and the crew began securing the mooring lines, John took a deep breath. He had survived a freezing ocean, a flooded engine compartment, and severe hypothermia. Surely he could survive a press conference. Maria, his assistant, was one of the first people allowed aboard once the gangway was secured. She rushed up and hugged him tightly. "I thought I lost you," she said, crying. "When I heard the news about the ship in distress, I knew you were on it. I have been terrified all night." "I'm okay," John assured her. "Bruised and sore, but okay." "You are never traveling by cargo ship again," Maria said firmly. "I don't care how bad the weather is. You're flying from now on." John laughed, then winced because laughing hurt his chest. "Deal." Captain Park approached them. "Mr. Cena, the authorities would like to debrief us about the incident, and then the media is requesting a press conference. I understand if you want to leave immediately." "You have been through enough." John shook his head. "No, Captain. We do this together like you said. Let's tell the story the right way." And so, an hour later, John Cena stood at a podium on the Dublin docks, flanked by Captain Park Min-jun, Chief Engineer Choi Hyan, and Lee Jae-sung. The entire crew of the Atlantic Promise stood behind them. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions, but John waited until they were quiet. Then he began to speak. "Last night, 23 people almost died in the Atlantic Ocean. We were saved by teamwork, skill, courage, and maybe a little bit of luck. I was part of that team, but I was only one part. The real heroes of this story are the crew of the Atlantic Promise, who never gave up even when death seemed certain." He gestured to the men and women behind him. "These people are professional mariners. They work long hours in dangerous conditions to transport cargo around the world. They do not seek recognition or praise. They just do their jobs with dedication and skill." John paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I am grateful that I was able to help last night. But I want everyone to understand something important. I am not stronger or braver than anyone else who was on that ship. When faced with a crisis, every single person stepped up and did what needed to be done, from the captain to the youngest crew member. That is what true courage looks like." The questions came rapidly after that. John answered them honestly, deflecting credit whenever possible and highlighting the contributions of others. Captain Park spoke about the technical challenges they faced. Choi explained the engine repairs. Jae-sung described guiding John through the procedures. It was the complete story, told by all the people who had lived through it. When the press conference finally ended, an official from the Irish Coast Guard approached the group. "Captain Park, Mr. Cena and crew of the Atlantic Promise," he said formally. "On behalf of the Irish Coast Guard and the Government of Ireland, I want to commend you for your actions last night. Your teamwork and courage exemplify the finest traditions of maritime service. You will all be recognized for your bravery." He shook hands with each crew member, spending time to thank them individually. As the sun began to set over Dublin Harbor, the crew of the Atlantic Promise finally dispersed. Some went to hotels arranged by the shipping company. Others went to visit family members who had traveled to see them. All of them were exhausted but profoundly grateful to be alive. John checked into a hotel and immediately fell into bed. His body needed rest to complete its recovery from the hypothermia and exhaustion. But before he slept, he sent a message to Emma, the 12-year-old girl he had met in Iceland just 3 days ago. "Hi, Emma. I had an adventure on my way home. It reminded me that being brave is not about being fearless. It's about doing what needs to be done even when you are scared. You do that every day with your illness. You are braver than I will ever be. Stay strong. Your friend John." He put the phone down and closed his eyes. Outside his window, the lights of Dublin twinkled in the darkness. Somewhere in those lights, 22 other people were settling in for their first peaceful night after nearly dying at sea. They had survived. They would heal. They would tell their stories to their families and friends, and they would never forget the night that a lighthouse sent an SOS signal at midnight, and a famous stranger became their brother in survival. 3 days after the Atlantic Promise limped into Dublin Harbor, the story had spread across the entire world. News outlets from Tokyo to New York were covering it. Social media was filled with photos, videos, and personal accounts from the crew members. John Cena's hotel room had become a fortress, surrounded by journalists. Security guards stood at the entrance to keep reporters away. His phone rang constantly with interview requests, movie studios asking if they could adapt the story, and well-wishers from around the globe. But John was not focused on any of that. He was sitting in a conference room with maritime investigators from the Irish Marine Casualty Investigation Board. They needed to understand exactly what had happened that night and whether anyone had been negligent. The lead investigator, a stern woman named Dr. Patricia Brennan, reviewed the technical reports on her laptop. "Mr. Cena, walk me through your actions in the flooded engine compartment one more time. I need to understand the sequence of events." John had already told the story 3 times, but he patiently explained it again. The bypass valves, the manual primer pump, the cold, the fear, the determination to keep going. Dr. Brennan listened carefully, taking notes. When he finished, she looked up at him with a serious expression. "Mr. Cena, I need to be clear about something. What you did was extremely dangerous. You had no formal training in marine engineering. You were not a member of the crew. By all normal protocols, you should never have been sent into that compartment." John felt his stomach tighten. Was he going to be blamed for something? Had he broken laws he did not know about? Dr. Brennan continued. "However, these were not normal circumstances. The ship was facing imminent destruction. The crew had exhausted all other options. In that context, your decision to volunteer was understandable." She paused. "And your execution of the repair procedures, under the guidance of Chief Engineer Choi, was technically sound. We have examined the bypass valves and the primer pump. Everything was done correctly." "So we did not break any rules?" John asked. "You broke several safety regulations," Dr. Brennan said bluntly, "but you also saved 23 lives. Sometimes those 2 things happen at the same time. Our job is not to punish people who survive. Our job is to learn from incidents like this and improve maritime safety." She closed her laptop and looked directly at John. "Off the record, Mr. Cena, what you did was incredibly brave. My husband is a merchant marine officer. When I told him your story, he said you have the heart of a sailor. That is high praise from him." After the meeting, John returned to his hotel and found Captain Park waiting in the lobby. The captain had showered and changed into clean clothes, but he still looked exhausted. "Captain Park," John said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine," Park replied. "I wanted to speak with you privately before you leave Ireland." "Can we take a walk?" They left through a back entrance to avoid the media and walked along the River Liffey. It was a cold afternoon, but the sun was shining for the first time since the storm. "The shipping company has conducted their investigation," Park said as they walked. "They have concluded that the engine failure was due to metal fatigue in the drive shaft. It was not something we could have predicted or prevented with normal maintenance. So you are not in trouble?" "No. In fact, they have commended my crew for their actions during the emergency." Park smiled slightly. "They are less happy about the fact that I allowed an untrained passenger to enter a dangerous compartment. But they understand why it happened." They walked in silence for a few moments, watching boats move along the river. "Mr. Cena," Park said finally, "I have been a ship captain for many years. I have commanded vessels through storms, equipment failures, and dangerous waters. But I have never faced a situation like that night. I thought I was going to die. I thought my entire crew was going to die." He stopped walking and turned to face John. "You gave us hope when we had none. You took action when action seemed impossible. I cannot fully express what that means to me and to my crew. We owe you our lives, John shook his head. You don't owe me anything, Captain. We helped each other. That's what people do in a crisis. Perhaps, Park said, but not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have stayed in their cabin and hoped for rescue. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object. This is for you. It was a ship's compass, old and brass, polished until it gleamed. This compass belonged to my grandfather, Park explained. He was a captain, too, for 50 years. He gave it to me when I first went to sea. He told me it would always guide me home safely. Captain Park, I cannot take this, John protested. It is a family heirloom. You are family now, Park said simply. You became part of my crew the moment you volunteered to go into that compartment. This compass helped guide me through my career. Now I want it to guide you through yours, whatever challenges you face. John accepted the compass with trembling hands. He understood what this gift meant. It was more than a token of gratitude. It was a symbol of respect and brotherhood. Thank you, Captain, John said quietly. I will treasure this always. They shook hands and Park pulled him into a brief hug. Then the captain walked away, leaving John standing by the river with his grandfather's compass in his hands. That evening, John visited the hospital where several crew members were receiving follow-up treatment. Kim Minho was being evaluated for stress-related symptoms. He had been having nightmares about drowning. Mr. Cena, Kim said when John entered his room, you should not be here. You should be resting. I wanted to check on everyone, John said, sitting in the chair next to Kim's bed. How are you feeling? Better, Kim said. The doctors say the nightmares will fade with time. They gave me information about counseling. He looked down at his hands. I thought I was brave. I wanted to be a sailor and see the world. But that night showed me I am not as strong as I thought. John leaned forward. Kim, listen to me. Being afraid does not mean you are weak. Every person on that ship was terrified. I was terrified. But you did not give up. You stayed at your post and did your job. That is real strength. But you went into the flooded compartment. You risked your life. Yes, and I was scared the entire time, John admitted. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. I wanted to run away. But I did not let the fear stop me. That is all courage is. Fear plus action. Kim thought about this. Will you go back to sea again? After what happened? John smiled. Probably not on a cargo ship. But I will not let this experience make me afraid of the ocean. The ocean is not evil. It is just powerful. We must respect it. They talked for a while longer, and when John left, Kim looked more relaxed. The nightmares would take time to heal, but the conversation had helped. The next day, John held his final press conference before leaving Ireland. This time he had insisted that the media also interview Michael O'Brien, the lighthouse keeper who had coordinated the rescue. Michael stood at the podium, uncomfortable in the spotlight but determined to represent his profession properly. Lighthouse keeping is a dying profession, he told the reporters. Modern technology can do much of what we used to do, but that night proved that human judgment and experience still matter. I stayed on the radio with that ship because I knew they needed to hear a human voice. They needed to know someone was watching over them. A reporter asked, Mr. O'Brien, in your 30 years as a lighthouse keeper, how does this rescue compare to others you have been involved in? Michael considered the question carefully. Every rescue is significant because every life matters. But this one was unique because of how close they came to disaster and how many things had to go right for them to survive. It was teamwork on a scale I have never seen before. After the press conference, Michael and John sat together in a quiet corner of the hotel restaurant. The older man sipped tea while John drank coffee. You handled that well, John said. The media can be overwhelming. I do not care much for attention, Michael admitted. But I wanted people to understand that maritime safety is not about one hero. It is about systems, training, communication, and many people doing their jobs correctly. You are right, John agreed. I have been thinking about that a lot over the past few days. Everyone wants to make me the hero of this story. But the real story is about all of us working together. Michael nodded. That is the truth. But humans love hero stories. They want to believe that one person can make a difference. And in a way, you did make a difference. Your willingness to help inspired others. That matters too. 6 months later, on a sunny June day, John returned to Ireland. This time, he came not for work, but for a special ceremony at Fanad Head Lighthouse. The Irish Coast Guard had organized a formal recognition event for everyone involved in the rescue. Captain Park flew in from Korea with several crew members. Michael O'Brien was there, of course, along with representatives from the Coast Guard, the Maritime Investigation Board, and the local community. Inside the lighthouse, they unveiled a small brass plaque. On December 14, 2019, the MV Atlantic Promise issued a distress call from these waters. Through the coordinated efforts of the ship's crew, the lighthouse keeper, the Irish Coast Guard, and civilian volunteer John Cena, all 23 souls aboard were saved. This plaque commemorates their courage, teamwork, and the enduring importance of maritime safety. The names of all crew members were listed below, with John's name appearing last and in the same small font as everyone else. That was how John had insisted it be designed. After the ceremony, John asked Michael to show him the radio room where he had coordinated the rescue. They climbed the spiral stairs to the top of the lighthouse where the equipment was housed. "This is where I sat that night," Michael said, pointing to a worn chair in front of the radio. "I listened to everything that happened on your ship. I heard your voice a few times, though I did not know it was you until later." John looked at the radio equipment. It was old but well maintained. "You stayed on the radio the entire time?" "Of course. I would never leave a ship alone during an emergency. Even if I could not physically help, I could make sure you knew someone was listening. Someone cared whether you survived." John felt emotion welling up in his chest. "Thank you, Michael, for being there, for caring, for doing your job when it mattered most." They stood together looking out the lighthouse window at the ocean. It was calm today, sparkling blue under the summer sun. It looked peaceful and beautiful, nothing like the violent monster it had been that December night. "The ocean has many moods," Michael observed. "Today it is gentle, but it can change quickly. That is why we must always respect it." Before leaving Ireland, John had one more visit to make. He had arranged to meet Emma, the Make-A-Wish girl from Iceland who was now in Dublin for medical treatment at a specialized hospital. Emma's mother greeted him in the hospital lobby with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Cena, thank you so much for coming. Emma has been so excited since she heard you were in town." "How is she doing?" John asked. "She is responding well to the new treatment protocol. The doctors are cautiously optimistic." Emma's mother smiled, "And your message to her after the rescue meant the world. She has read it 100 times. They went to Emma's room. She was sitting up in bed looking thin and pale but alert. Her face lit up when she saw John. "You are really here," she said. "I promised I would visit you if I was ever in Dublin," John said, sitting in the chair next to her bed. "A promise is a promise." They talked for over an hour. Emma wanted to hear every detail of the rescue. She asked technical questions about the engine and the flooded compartment. She was particularly interested in how John had managed to stay calm when he was scared. "I kept thinking about brave people I knew," John told her. "People who face scary things every day. People like you, Emma. You fight battles I cannot imagine. If you can be brave, then I can be brave too." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I am not that brave. I cry sometimes. I get angry at being sick." "That does not mean you are not brave," John said gently. "Brave people still cry. They still get angry. They still feel fear, but they keep fighting anyway. That is exactly what you do every single day." Before he left, Emma gave him a drawing she had made. It showed a lighthouse on a cliff, a ship on the ocean, and a figure labeled John swimming in the water. At the top she had written, "Heroes help each other." John carefully folded the drawing and put it in his pocket. "I am going to keep this forever," he told her. As he left the hospital, Emma's mother walked him to the exit. "Thank you for taking time to visit her," she said. "You have no idea how much it means. She inspires me," John said honestly. "Meeting kids like Emma reminds me what is really important in life." That evening, John had dinner with Captain Park and several crew members at a restaurant in Dublin. They shared stories and laughter. Lee Jae-sung showed everyone photos of his recent wedding. Kim Min-ho was back at sea on a new ship and loving it again. Chief Engineer Choi had retired and was enjoying time with his grandchildren. "To survival," Captain Park said, raising his glass, "and to new friendships formed in difficult times." They all raised their glasses and drank to that. As the evening wound down and people began to leave, Park pulled John aside one more time. "Mr. Cena, I have a question for you. That night when you volunteered to go into the compartment, what were you thinking? What made you decide to do it?" John thought about this question. He had been asked it many times by reporters, but he had never fully answered it honestly. "I was thinking about all the children I had met through Make-A-Wish," he said finally. "Kids who face death every day. Kids like Emma. They do not have a choice about their battles. But I had a choice that night. I could hide in my cabin or I could try to help. How could I face another sick child if I had chosen to hide?" Park nodded slowly. "You wanted to be worthy of their courage." "Yes," John said. "Exactly that." 6 months after the ceremony, the Atlantic Promise was fully repaired and back in service. Captain Park sent John a photo of the ship leaving port on its first voyage after the repairs. The crew was lined up on deck waving at the camera. The message with the photo read, "She runs better than ever, and we will never forget the night she almost died, and the friends who saved her. Fair winds and following seas, my friend. Captain Park." John printed the photo and hung it in his home office next to Emma's drawing of the lighthouse. He also kept Captain Park's grandfather's compass on his desk, where he could see it every day. The story of the Atlantic Promise became one of those tales that people told and retold. It appeared in maritime safety training courses as an example of creative problem-solving under pressure. It was featured in documentaries about modern shipping. It became a case study in leadership and teamwork. But for the 23 people who had been on that ship, it was not just a story. It was a night they would never forget, a night when death had been close enough to touch but life had won. And for John Cena, it was a reminder that heroism is not about being famous or strong or fearless. It is about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. It is about teamwork, courage, and the willingness to help others even when you are scared. On the anniversary of the rescue, John always took a moment to look at that compass on his desk. He would remember the cold water, the fear, the exhaustion, but he would also remember the gratitude in Captain Park's eyes. Kim Min-ho's tears of relief, Emma's drawing, Michael O'Brien's dedication to his lighthouse, and he would remember that on one December night in 2019, a lighthouse sent an SOS signal at midnight. And everyone who answered that call, from the ship's crew to the Coast Guard to one unexpected volunteer, became part of something larger than themselves. They became part of a story about humanity at its best, about people helping people, about courage, sacrifice, and the bonds that form when strangers work together to survive. That story would live on in the brass plaque at Fanad Head Lighthouse, in the memories of those who were there, and in the hearts of everyone who heard it and remembered that sometimes, when everything seems lost, hope can still find a way. And that was the truth that emerged from that cold December night. Not a story about one hero, but a story about many heroes who refused to give up, who helped each other survive, and who proved that the best of humanity shines brightest in the darkest moments.